I feel really grateful that I can make a living at music, which is becoming harder to do, you know?
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to the Trap Set. I'd like to play something for you. You're hearing The Beginning and the End by ISIS, featuring my guest, Aaron Harris on drums. A native of Maine, Harris moved to Boston in the late 90s and soon became an integral member of the influential New England hardcore scene. Aaron comes from a long line of shipbuilders, and as a drummer, his attention to detail is precise and architectural. His command of the craft evokes images of a hand-built, stylish and sleek sea vessel. Now based in LA, Aaron is a successful composer for film trailers. I spoke to him at Trap Set HQ in downtown Los Angeles. And now my conversation with Aaron Harris.
My father and my grandfather both were in shipbuilding. There's like a big shipyard there called BIW, and it's like a lot of contracts for the Navy building destroyers and stuff like that, tugboats, and that was like the big employer in my hometown, outside of like, you know, Walmart or the little mom and pop antique stores. And you know, you could go to Portland. You know, you could find jobs in other bigger cities, but my town, that was the main employer, was BIW.
How far were you from Portland?
About 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in '96, the year I graduated high school, I moved to Boston to play music, and that's where my music career started. I actually started before I even moved there. In my senior year in high school, I had a band that I had started with some friends from high school who would move to Boston to go to art school. And
at Emerson?
No, at Mass College of Art. And my wife went to Emerson, though. And they were a year ahead of me, two guys, and they both went to the same school. And so they graduated, moved down there, and I was a senior. And they were booking shows for us down there in Boston, and I would go down on the weekends, take the bus down, play a show, take the bus back, you know, and I think a lot of my...
They had drums down there for you to use?
Yeah, usually I would use the, like, whoever we were playing with kit, you know, like, can our drummer use your kit kind of thing?
Yes.
And a lot of the shows we did get were like opening for friends, you know, like there was a band called Otis that we used to open for a lot, or like 454 Big Block. I don't know if you remember that name at all, or like some art school bands like this band Dagobah and
Back when it seemed relatively obscure to use a Star Wars reference.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So yeah, I would go down on the weekends and play shows and come back, and like sometimes we'd play in a bar and I would have to wait in the van outside or wait outside until it was set time, and then I'd come in and play and have to go back outside because I was, 17.
Mm-hmm.
And
my dad used to have to drive me to gigs
to go play
and like get me in.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. I think when I did come back and see my classmates, and they'd be like, "What'd you do over the weekend?" "Oh, I went to Boston to play a show." I think a lot of them thought I was lying or just trying to sound cool or something. So
my parents let me go on tour during spring break in high school. And after that, like, school was over for me.
Yeah.
I wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I told them my parents weren't too, like, adamant on me going to college anyway, but they didn't want me to just screw off and go play music. So,
which they saw as screwing off.
Yeah, like I think any responsible parent would probably try to steer their kid away from doing something like that. You know, I've thought about that a lot over the years, and at first I thought it was sort of discouraging, but in a bad way. But now I think of it and I'm like, well, I'm about to be a parent myself, and I'm like, well, I could see how they would not really want me to do that, but at the same time, they weren't like encouraging me to go to college either. I think they just saw that as like a bad option.
College?
No, playing in a band.
Okay.
And really, it ended up being a way out for me. I mean, it was if I had stayed in Maine, I really don't know where my life would have ended up, or I wouldn't have had the opportunities that I've had. So playing music was like a real big jumping off point.
Were your parents music fans?
My dad's a drummer. He played in a high school band, like a 70s style band. They did covers. They did their own original stuff. It's quite a hippie. Kind of looked like John Lennon. But not until I was, God, I can't remember what age. Maybe sometime in high school, he and his buddies from that band back in the day decided they'd play again. So he went out and bought a drum kit. And up until then, there wasn't a drum kit in my house. So yeah, suddenly there was a drum kit in my basement. And on Thursday nights, my dad worked full time, but my mom was a stay-at-home mom. So on Thursday nights, she would go get groceries for about an hour. So an hour on Thursday nights was my time that I would just go downstairs and try to learn how to play drums. So I would just put on headphones and play along to records and try to learn.
What were you listening to on the headphones?
A lot of Red Hot Chili Peppers. So like Chad Smith, like I know like some people are not Chili Peppers fans, but I think Chad Smith is an awesome drummer.
You know, when I was in high school, I was a big Fugazi fan. Yeah. And I probably hated the Chili Peppers. Yeah. Or at least professed hatred for them.
I was a big Fugazi fan too.
But then, as I've gotten to know Ian MacKay a little bit, he talks about how much he loves Chad's drumming and how fun it is to jam with him. And Ian's good friends with all those guys. Yeah. So it all came full circle.
It's funny. Like, I mean, say what you will about the Chili Peppers, but if you can just consider Chad for a minute, like I think he's a very solid drummer, and from like a learning standpoint, I just sort of lucked out in picking him to mimic, because I learned a really solid foundation for drumming, and then I started to get into bands like Fugazi and Nirvana and Soundgarden, and I had a sort of a limited like musical palette to work with being in that small town. Like there wasn't a ton of exposure for me until I met kids older who were like, hey, you should check out this band.
Were you the oldest kid in your family?
Yeah.
Or an only child? Or?
No, I have two younger sisters.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm the oldest. And
did they leave?
No, they're still there. Yep. Still in Maine. All of my family, everyone still there. I'm the only one who left. I'm the only one who got into music. I'm the only one who, I don't know, broke away from the cycle of, being born in a small town, living there, working there, spending your life there. Mm-hmm. And there's that small town mentality of like, I don't know, there's like sort of maybe a little bit of fear about going outside of your town or your comfort zone. You get used to being in a place, and I think it's scary. Like, my family sometimes asks me like, how do you deal with living in Los Angeles? How do you deal with all the chaos? How do you,
Right.
But I'm so used to it. It doesn't feel that chaotic to me.
You also live in one of the least chaotic parts of town.
Yeah. I do now. We lived in, my wife and I lived in Hollywood, in West Hollywood for quite a while, for about 14 years. So we were right in the cut for a little bit there, but it's nice to be out in Mount Washington, and it's more my vibe, but I think it's taken my wife a little bit to get used to. Can
you remember how you felt in your body when you were listening to the Chili Peppers or whoever it was and playing drums on Thursday nights?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like, I mean, it sounds cliche, but it felt like an escape, you know, like it felt like a connection, an opportunity. I don't know if that's the right word, an escape, something that made me feel like alive, you know, and there was more outside of my town, my small upbringing.
Had you felt that with anything else before?
No, I don't think so. I mean, maybe watching movies or things like that, but music was really my escape as a kid. You know, I didn't have a lot of friends. I would kind of just walk around in the woods and make my own adventures and listen to music and go on long bike rides, and or just sit in my room and listen to music and look at albums and look at the artwork and the credits and read obsessively who did the record, who they thanked, what the song titles were, what the people in the band looked like, you know, or get Thrasher magazine and there would be like music section. And that's how I discovered Helmet, you know, like this band Helmet, they just looked like a bunch of dorks, you know, and then had something like really like drew me.
I would say that two of them look like dorks and John looks like a jock.
Yeah. And I was like, he's like the opposite of what you were used to seeing at that time. Like if you were a metal band, you looked like you were in a metal band, you know? So
right.
I always kind of looked like the joke for me, like being in ISIS was a lot of times people would ask if I was the band manager, you know, because I don't look.
Someone's got to be an adult around here.
I don't fit the metal criteria, I guess, or what a typical metal musician looks like. But
well, so you moved to Boston in 1996,
yep.
And then shortly after that, you met the other guys from ISIS.
Yeah, so my high school band didn't last too long. Like, it wasn't really like. I think you know, for the other guys, it was more of a hobby, and for me, I think I took it a little more seriously than they did. So, I was really looking for something that was more a vision and more a priority for the other people involved. And that's when I started working at this warehouse for this like Northeast music chain called Newbury Comics.
Mm-hmm. Well, I lived in Boston.
Oh yeah.
In the 90s also.
Yeah. So you know.
Great. So you were working there. I was working at the distribution center for Copy Clop. Remember Copy Clop?
Yeah. I remember the vans or the trucks driving all over the place. Yeah, totally. Copy Clop. I my first job when I moved to Boston was working in the warehouse at Newbury Comics, and that's where I met the other guys in ISIS. And it was sort of a breeding ground for musicians and get work for. I mean, it was known as a place where you could get a job and still go on tour. And a lot of musicians worked there, and a lot of musicians had worked there, had friends work there. So before I even moved to Boston, I had a friend say, you should work at Newbury Comics. My buddy's the manager. I'll get you an interview or whatever. So I got lucky there, and I got a job right away. And
you weren't going to college. You were just working and playing.
Yeah.
How did you make it work? How did you pay rent and do what you need to do?
Like I said, I got that job right away. Mm-hmm. So for getting a place, you know, you had to pay first and last month, and security. I think they still do that now. So first month was paid. I had 2 roommates. The rent was probably like $160, you know?
Nice.
You know, it was cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Got my job like within a few days of moving there, and yeah, luckily it just worked, you know. And I hustled hard. I worked hard. I hustled hard. I was determined to make it work.
And when you met the other guys from ISIS, had they started the band already?
No. Well, no. They had started what would become ISIS. They had started. So Jeff and Aaron, the other Aaron, some people don't know there's 2 Aarons in ISIS, me, and then there's Aaron Turner. And Aaron Turner and Jeff, the bass player, lived together. And Jeff worked at the warehouse. Aaron did Hydra Head Records. And they had started they had started jamming and had this vision of a style of band they wanted to start, and were looking for a drummer and just weren't finding anybody that was working out. And I was talking with Jeff one day, and we shared a lot of the same musical interests, and he asked me if I wanted to come jam with them, and he actually asked me if I wanted to try out. And I said, sure, I'll come play with you guys. Like, didn't really have much expectation for it, or didn't really know what I was in store for. I was fairly familiar with Neurosis, but I was sort of familiar with their older work, the more punk era of Neurosis. So when he said Neurosis, I was like, I don't know, it's probably not really my steez. But he also referenced like Godflesh and Melvins and some other bands that I did really like. So I was a little confused, but I was like, yeah, I would love to play with you guys. So we did play, and after the first rehearsal, they were like, hey, you're a good fit. Do you want to join the band? Do you want to play with us? And I said, sure. And it was sort of a weird struggle for me, and I still was really attached to this other band. The band I started in high school was called Loga, just a made up name. And I was still pretty attached to that band and really wanted it to work. So I did play with Jeff and Aaron for a bit, but we wrote a few songs, and I decided that my heart was in Loga and I wanted that to work. So I quit. Mm-hmm. And before I quit, I recorded some demos with them. And we kind of went our ways, but I also was still working with Jeff, so I would see him regularly. And I asked him one day, I don't remember how it came up, but we were talking, and I was like, did you guys find a drummer? And he's like, yeah, we've been trying a few people, but nobody's working the way that you did.
Sweet.
Yeah. And so, long story short, I eventually came around and saw that these guys were really like passionate about this band, which would become ISIS, and seemed like a good opportunity. And I did like those guys a lot. So I was like, hey, if you guys haven't found a drummer, let's do it, and yeah, it just kind of snowballed from there.
And when you say it snowballed, what does that mean?
Well, we got a couple other members. We had a few early members that were around for a year or two, but didn't really work out. And again, weren't as focused as we were. Like, I think one guy, the original keyboard player, not voluntarily, but quit on his own, like mm-hmm. of his own will, decided that he didn't want to do the band anymore. So we got another guy who was just sort of a drug addict weirdo. It wasn't really committed to the band. And, we would write these songs, and he would kind of show up with this crazy pedal board and all these pedals, but didn't really know how to work them, and would just kind of like push buttons. It wasn't very focused. We had a guitar player before Mike, who again wasn't like as focused on the vision for the band that we had, or wasn't as dedicated, and wasn't really a good fit. So there was a few like lineup changes until we settled on Cliff and Mike, who would become the members of the band. And that was around Celestial, right before Celestial. So like our first couple records were with other members, other guitar and keyboard players. And you can hear it in the sound of the band. I mean, when Celestial came around, that's, I feel like, when our sound sort of solidified and we started to become who we eventually became. If that makes sense.
And when you would go back to Maine,
yeah,
and relatives would ask you what kind of band you were in,
yeah,
how would you describe it?
I guess I would describe it as, I mean, they knew. I don't know if they really listened. I think they kind of thought I was just doing music, and they weren't really that interested in what it sounded like. They just were like, oh, Aaron's in like an experimental phase. He's like, it's like a weird thing in my family where they're not like hypercritical of what you're doing, or like honestly that hyper interested in it, where they would like actively go listen or seek out what I was doing until the band did become fairly successful in an underground capacity. But yeah, I mean, that question honestly didn't come up too much. It was sort of like,
Still doing that thing?
Still doing that thing, huh? Still, are you, my grandparents were more like, so are you going to go to college? Are you, what's your plan? Like, what are you going to do? But my parents were just kind of like, oh, you're still alive. You're good. The music, as long as you like it, I guess, they weren't too strict about it.
Within the band, did you have an internal way of thinking about the music in the sense that you had like a sound that you were trying to achieve?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you can really hear it on our early stuff. Like we wore our influences on our sleeve, and I feel like a lot of bands early on do until you can sort of develop your own sound. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty focused on those bands I mentioned earlier, like Neurosis, Melvins, Godflesh, just like there were a few core bands that we were really drawn to and had aspired to sort of sound like, I guess. And I mean, that's unavoidable. I mean, every band starts that way. I mean, you go into forming a band with a vision of what you want to sound like, and it's usually, the bands that are influencing you at the time. So if you can break away from that and get your own sound and do your own thing, like I guess that's the goal, And so yeah, early on there was some pretty heavy influences, and we always had influences, but I think we were able to incorporate them into what we were doing a little better.
When you say you hustled hard during this period, did that mean that you were driven to achieve specific goals?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's a weird thing. Like, I think coming from a small town and going to Boston and playing music, I think I went into it with just wanting to make it work, but I didn't have specific goals or aspirations. I know that might sound weird, but I knew I really wanted to work hard at it and focus on it and just give it my best shot. But I didn't really know what I could do with it or even have any expectations. I just really wanted to play music and play some shows and meet some people that were also enthusiastic about it and try to do something. But being able to make a living off of it and go on tour all over the world, that I never even, like, I've gone honest truth, I never even considered that would be a possibility. So I think that was a really good thing, like not having those goals or those expectations of how it would play out, because that's sort of, in my mind, every time I do that, and I have done that in my life, it ends up kind of setting me back in a way. Like if I go into something with an expectation.
It's interesting because I would say half of the people that I talk to operate that way.
Yeah.
And then there are some people that have achieved a lot that are very goal oriented.
Yeah.
So it seems like there isn't really one way of living that, is hands down more effective.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to put intentions out in the world. Like,
I think it's also good to kind of know yourself and not try to be something that you're not. So if you're not the kind of person that's making a year plan and a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan, maybe that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to set intentions, to have goals, but like to keep them realistic. And every time that I've done something where I have put these grand expectations on it, it usually has just become a frustrating experience. So if I keep it focused on what I'm doing, like if it's music, if I just focus on the music and not think about what other people might think or how it might be perceived or could it evolve into this, like hope that does happen. But like for me, it's been better to just hope that it happens, but stay focused on what I'm doing.
In my situation, there have been goals that I've set and achieved, but then it's almost like just ticking off a box rather than really experiencing the moment.
Yeah. you want to stay inspired, and you do want to achieve goals and keep growing and keep moving, but you don't want to set yourself up for some sort of setback where if you don't reach that goal, or if you don't get what you expected out of it, then it's, you know, sends you into a spiral or a depression or a frustrated, you know, feeling. It's tough. I mean, in the line of work I'm in now, there's a lot of rejection is not the right word, but there's a lot of, well, maybe rejection is the right word.
The Trap set will always be available for free, but we rely on donations from our listeners. Please visit our website at thetrapset.net and click donate. Subscribe to our show on iTunes, and if you enjoy what you hear, give us a review.
Well, let's talk about what you do right now.
Yeah. So I'm working as a composer, mostly for trailers, for movie trailers, and it's a very, very competitive world. And I and the company that I'm working for with, the guys I work with, we're all submitting music on a daily basis to pitches for potential use. And I mean, it's like every day, multiple times a day, pitching music. And, 90% of the time you don't hear anything, or it doesn't go anywhere, or it's an incredible amount of rejection.
It's also an incredible amount of vulnerability to let someone else be the arbiter of whether or not something you made is worthwhile.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've gotten to this place, but I've tried to get to a place where I'm not even worried about that, and I'm trying to enjoy the process of writing music and, taking ownership of it in that way, just because so much of it is out of my hands that the time that I'm spending doing it, I don't want to worry about what other people think about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many hurdles beyond you writing the music and handing it to the next person. Like, it just goes through so many steps before it arrives to that finished trailer or the episode or the movie or wherever, the scene. So yeah, I just kind of have to put it out of my head and just pitch options. But
it's also like, if you can experience some sort of real emotion while you're writing the music and creating it, that translates.
Yeah, for sure.
Other people will feel it.
Yeah. And for me, there's a certain amount of, I guess it took me a long time to get out of my songwriter brain, because a lot of movie trailers are not really looking for a well-written song. They're looking for something that's going to be effective. So it was changing my brain and the way I write music.
I always say it's like the difference between making a sculpture and being an architect and building a house.
Yeah.
Or sometimes building an office building.
Yeah.
You have to be artful within the parameters that are given to you. Mm-hmm. And you can't just choose all of the parameters. Right. And in the end, it has to function, and somebody has to live in that house.
Totally. That's a good analogy. It's a very weird world, and it took me a long time to get my head around it and a lot of work to get where I'm at. But
well, how did you get into it to begin with?
It's something I always wanted to get into, and I sort of arrived to this point where I wasn't post-ISIS. I was kind of doing some studio work, and I was doing some drum teching work, and I wasn't very happy doing those things. Like I liked making records, but it didn't seem like something that was, I liked it, but it didn't totally click for me. I'm not a producer in a way. Like I'm not very good at saying, I have a hard time saying like, that sucked, do it again. Or like, could you play a little better? Or, like,
right.
I'm not very good at that in all aspects of my life. And so it was okay, but I wasn't totally happy doing it. The teching, there's no future in that. Like that was it was a cool thing to do. The money was good. I got to work with some really great drummers, but it wasn't that fulfilling, and there was no future in it. And it was also a weird time. So, I was just trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and composing was something that I had always been interested in, but I didn't really have the confidence to like, I didn't think I was capable of it. I'd never done a solo record, like all the other guys in the band had done a solo record. I'd never really written much music on my own. So yeah, just one day with some encouragement from my wife, I said, screw it. I'm going to write a reel, and I'm going to shop it around and just see. I mean, I don't have anything to lose.
Did you have a foundation in any other instruments besides drums?
No.
So what was your process of writing when you started?
A lot of exploration. I had a very, very like elementary understanding of a piano and or a keyboard and notes and what would work together, and I could play a little bit of guitar, and very minimal understanding of all of anything outside of drumming, which even drumming I'm self-taught and don't really like. I can't read music,
which you don't need to do to write music.
No, not at all. But like my music, like my understanding of music is very like, I don't know what the word is.
It sounds like it's intuitive.
Yeah, it's just a feeling. It's more intuitive. It comes from really exploration and feeling and beating my head against the wall. but like I can't sit down and be like, oh, this key is in the key of B major, and here are the notes that will work with B major. Like that's not me. I don't really come from that background, and so I just wrote some songs and some compositions, and made a reel and shopped them around, and didn't really expect to hear back, but I heard back from a couple I guess libraries, and I had to decide like which one would probably be the best fit for me. And I one of the companies I heard back from was a company called Methodic Doubt, and what they were doing was very much in line with what I do and my background, and kind of came from a dark, almost rock sensibility. Like one of the shows they scored was that show Banshee. And I actually had a friend who was an editor on Banshee, and he told me about the company Methodic Doubt. And yeah, they just seemed like a really good fit, and they wrote back and said they were interested, and we started talking, and yeah, I lucked out. Like I got in with a really good company that fit what I do and understood what I do, and had some, those guys really took me under their wing and kind of showed me how to write for trailers, how to evolve, how to do what I'm doing. So, yeah, it was just, like I said, like a lot of hard work and a lot of trying to figure it out.
When did you start feeling confident?
I still don't feel that confident.
How long have you been doing it?
I've been doing it since 2015.
Okay.
So 4 years. I mean, I feel a lot more confident now. But there's always curveballs. There's always things that come in where it's like, oh man, that's a pretty big request. I don't know. I'm going to give it my best shot, or like, but also I love it. I love what I'm doing. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm still like feel really passionate about it. And I feel really grateful that I can make a living at music, which is becoming harder to do,
Yeah.
So like when you were talking earlier about the frustrations of this and what we do and how it can sometimes feel like a grind, like I just try to remind myself like, yeah, but you're making a living at music. And that's like incredible. Like I was just driving across town with my wife last night, and there was a billboard for a movie I had a trailer for it. And so like now I can drive across the city and see these billboards for these movies, and it's really incredible. It feels amazing to be like,
it is really cool. It's like I'm part of showbiz.
Yeah, it's like little me just, had something to do with that. That's fucking insane. Like, there's been times where both sides of the street were movies that I was involved in, and that's like, fuck, man, that's crazy. Like that's really cool. That like keeps me going. Makes me feel good.
All right. Well, we kind of glossed over the rise of ISIS.
Yeah.
So maybe we should go back to that too. When were you able to quit your job at Newbury Comics?
We quit. I had to quit there. Well, actually, I quit and I worked as a bike messenger in Boston for the last couple of years. I was in Boston. And,
it's a great way to stay in awesome shape.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Did you ever get in an accident?
A few times. I got doored. I got run over.
Fuck. Did you break bones?
Never broke any. No, never broke anything. Amazingly. When I say run over, I got my foot run over. Just didn't break anything. It was fine. Got doored a few times. One time was pretty bad, but like just got scraped up real bad and knocked out, but didn't break anything. But that was, again, another career that you could do as a musician, where you could do it and then you could go on tour and come back and you'd still have a job, and a lot of my musician friends were doing it. And I worked for this company called Marathon, and it was like me and the drummer of Old Man Gloom, Santos, and Caleb from Cave In, and a couple other musicians, and we all worked, for this guy named Stuart, this gay guy named Stuart, who was like just fucking hilarious. Just like was the most fun to work with. Like that job was the most fun job I've ever had outside of working for myself. Like working for someone else at a job, that job was just like the best. Except in the winter when it was like 17 below.
Boston is probably the most aggro city in the United States too. Like people are just angry. Angry. And the streets are designed for horses and buggies. They've never really been updated. The infrastructure.
No sense.
It's just crazy.
And this was before Waze. This was before Google Maps. This was before iPhones. This was when, if I had to find somewhere I didn't know, it was either use a map or ask somebody that, like, hey, how do I get to 427 Broadway in Cambridge? Where is that?
Over by Harvard there?
It's over in Cambridge Square, halfway to Harvard. But a lot of the stops did become routine, so it would be like, the Prudential Building or the International Place or the stopping over in MIT or someplace in Harvard Square. Like you'd start to see the same places come up and you'd be like, oh, I know where that is. And it would just, after like 6 months of doing it, it just was like, you could start to formulate routes in your head, because before that it was just like, I'm just shooting all over the place. Fuck, just went to Back Bay, but I got this other one in downtown, and I was just in downtown, but I didn't realize that was downtown. And like, it was just chaos until you figured it out. And then you could go, okay, if I do this route, I can hit them all in one line. Mm-hmm. Or I'm going to shoot and do this one real quick because I can bang that one out real quick, but I know this one's going to take a long time, or like, So starting off, it was pretty tough, but really fun job. So I quit Newbury to do that, did that for a few years. Then the band decided to move to Los Angeles. So moved out here, which was tough because we were doing the band, but I wasn't making a living at it.
When did you move out here?
2003.
Okay.
Moved out here. It was a very cool change of scenery and pace, but also like tough because it was uprooting my life and the band hadn't taken off yet. I was still had to work a day job, so that meant moving to a new city, trying to figure that out, trying to find a new job, so.
You and your wife were together at that point?
Yep.
Yeah.
She grew up out here, so she
helps.
was familiar with it. So we used one of her, I think she still had her car, her mom still had her car from when she was younger, so we had this little stick shift BMW, and we lived with her mom for the first few months just to get settled. And I got a job at like a really weird job. I got a job at a wood shop that made custom wood burl steering wheels for like Range Rover and Mercedes and Bentley. Mm-hmm. So I was like taking steering wheels and shift knobs and inlays from these like sports cars or like luxury vehicles, stripping off the fake leather or the real leather and putting on like a nice walnut burl or like
a veneer.
Yeah.
They couldn't even bother to make a solid steering wheel for a fucking Bentley.
No, those are just like, it's crazy,
just
man.
Just like MDF.
Those are just fucking, yeah, it's just a fucking piece of routed, sometimes we use MDF, but mostly we would use plywood. Mm-hmm. We had templates, we'd route them out, get them to fit the bar, the inner bar, glue them, wrap the burl, polish them up.
Classy.
That was that. So I started doing that, and then the band, right when we did Panopticon was when things started to take off, and I started making money where I was like, you know what? We're touring enough now. I'm making enough money now that I can quit this job. And that was the first time in 2007 that I quit my job and did music full time. Mm-hmm. And I never turned back.
And then when did the band break up?
2010.
So 3 years after
Yep.
quitting your day job, the band broke up.
The band broke up.
And what was going through your head then?
Oh, shit.
Well, why did the band break up?
Well, it's a long story. Some members felt like it had run its course. I didn't feel that way. I felt like there was a lot of potential still left in the band. I felt like...
It had been, 15 years, basically?
13.
13, yeah.
We were the biggest we'd ever been. We'd put out the most successful record we'd ever made. We had the most fans. Like, everything on paper said, keep going. Like, you guys are still climbing, still going up.
And did you feel like you were still getting along with everybody well at that point?
Well, the relationships in the bands started to disintegrate, mm-hmm. and that's what eventually led to, I think, certain people feeling like they didn't want to do it.
Aside from being the drummer, what did you see as your creative role in the band?
It depends. I mean, some days I felt like... Some days I guess I felt like the therapist. Some days I felt like I did a lot of the live recordings for the band. So like a lot of the documenting of rehearsals and songwriting. So that was like my role started to become bigger in the production of the albums, I guess you would say. I mean, I didn't by any means produce any of the albums, but I guess instead of just being the drummer, I started to take on more of a role of organizing ideas and I would record every rehearsal and go home and mix it and send it to the guys. And I was on top of that and keeping the process going and even getting together with some of the members on the side and writing stuff, because for a bit there, the bass player and Mike, the guitar player, were living in New York. So it was me and Aaron and Cliff out here. And some days me and Cliff would just go write, or me and Aaron, or yeah, I mean, I guess I I took on some of that, but also like on tour, I was always the guy who drove the van. All throughout the band, that was my role for some. I like to drive.
You're the dad?
I'm the dad. Yeah, so I mean, relationships started to kind of fall apart, and people started to feel like, I guess, the direction of the band was going in a way that they weren't really feeling that great about, and for whatever reason, that's what it just kind of fell apart.
So it didn't really feel like your choice to end the band.
No.
And then after 13 years, this kind of family that you'd been in, which had been built up to the point where it was also providing you with your income, just went away. And what was going through your mind?
I mean, it was sort of like a death. Like, it was, at first I was like, I'm fine with this. It feels like, I feel good about it. Not like that you would feel that way about a death, but like, I kind of went through phases like a death.
You kind of do. I mean, you can go through denial and...
like I guess you're right. Like, there was this weird sense of denial, but in telling myself that like, it's cool, we ran our course. I feel good. And then getting mad and being like, oh, no, I don't feel good about this. This is fucked up. Why did we stop? This is dumb. Why did we could have just taken a break? Why did we have to,
declare that it's over?
Like, and that wasn't my decision. And that was mostly another person's, and the statement that was put out was written by another person. And like, all kind of just went along with it. It just kind of, the band just kind of morphed into this dysfunctional group of guys that just didn't know how to talk to each other, didn't know how to communicate. We could play on stage fine, but like beyond that, it was hard for us to communicate, I guess, because we had done this thing for so long and it had become this business. And for some people, it went in a direction that they weren't really feeling good about. And I started to get mad, and then I started to get really depressed and feel like, wow, I mean, what am I going to do? I'd started producing bands while I was still in ISIS, so I had that. But I mean, there was a part of me that was just sort of depressed and felt like maybe I just will not do music anymore, because I just felt like defeated, And my wife was really supportive and kind of talked me out of those times and got me refocused. And I owe her a lot for reassuring me and getting me refocused on not going down that path and not getting too bummed out about it.
What were you thinking about doing when you thought about leaving music?
I really don't know. I mean, I kind of went back to some of those like things I did post band, or maybe going to school, or maybe pick up a trade, go into carpentry. I always liked carpentry. Mm-hmm. I had some skills there. There was just figure out some sort of trade,
Yeah, I mean, I thought that way too for a while when things got hard.
Yeah.
It was just like, well, I love music, and this is making me not be able to enjoy music anymore if I'm forcing a career. Yeah. And then, strangely enough, then things started to pick up. So, I don't know.
It can be a real roller coaster.
But you know what, though? I actually think, I've talked to people that have done other things after they left bands that we would consider, to be iconic bands. Mm-hmm. And I think that music can be a calling for your entire life, or it can be kind of like the medium through which you get connected to a certain creative energy that you can then applied to a number of things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was really lucky to have the opportunity. I got to travel all over. I got to play music. I got to see things I never would have seen. I got to meet people I never would have met, have opportunities I never would have had. So it took me a long time to get over ISIS, and I feel like I'm over it. But yeah, getting to this point was a lot of work because it was something that I put all my eggs in, you know, like this one basket, and I did it in like the crucial years of my life. Mm-hmm. So I don't even remember what age I was when I'm 41 now. So when the band broke up 9 years ago, so I was 32. So at 32, I was faced with, what am I going to do now? And I always knew that day would come because I knew that the band would never be something that would go on forever. I just didn't think it would happen then. And I guess, I mean, how would I have known?
Right.
You never are going to know, like, I mean, unless it gets to a point where it's obvious, but like, I knew the day would always come, and it was always lingering in the back of my head, like, you are setting yourself up for one day, this is going to go away, and you're going to have a plan. But then, you know, the band was doing really well, and we were making good money, and it seemed like everything was cool. I mean, even though the relationships in the band were shitty, it seemed like, this is kind of shitty to say, but it seemed like it was good enough that nobody would stop doing it.
Was it getting to a point where you weren't enjoying playing the music anymore?
I mean, if I'm being honest, there were definitely nights playing where I was just like, I want to just go back to the hotel and go to sleep. I'm so tired, you know? Mm-hmm. But that's not because I wasn't enjoying playing the songs. That's just because I was worn out, you know? Because when you're touring for 7 weeks at a time and you're doing it in the fashion that, in the style that we were doing, which was, you know, we were renting 2 vans. We'd pile everybody in 2 vans. We'd drive ourselves. We didn't have any techs. We didn't have drivers. We had a tour manager and a sound guy. So our days were get up at 9 a.m., 10 a.m., push it as far as you can, but say you have a 6-hour drive. You got to load in at 3 o'clock. Okay, we got to leave at 9 or 8 would be ideal, so we'd have an hour to buffer. Mm-hmm. So you get up at 8, you hit the road, you try to get there as few stops as you can, get to load in, set up, sound check, set up all your merch, turn in your guest list, go over the rider, go run and get some food, doors, play, break down, load out, go to the hotel, try to get some sleep, get up, do it again. And it's like that over and over.
Yeah, and it's counter to the spirit that music originally brought out in you of escape, right? Because you're in a pattern. You're in a pattern that's just as predictable as going to the shipyard every day.
Yeah,
in Maine.
Right.
Except you get a couple hours to really have fun every day playing music.
I mean, the best I felt all day was after we played.
Yeah.
Because I just exercised, even though it was playing drums, and sometimes like back when you could smoke in like a smoke-filled club, and it was, you know, have a few beers, and it wasn't like exercise, but it was exercise, you know, because I was a drummer, and you'd have endorphins, and you'd be like, oh, I feel great. And then you'd be like, all right, but I got to pack up, and we got to load out, and we got to settle, and I got to get to the hotel, and I got to go to sleep.
Well, the nice thing now is that you've built up this parallel skill set. So
totally,
if your band got back together, or if you got into another similar situation, you wouldn't be leaning on it as heavily as you were when you were in ISIS, which, even if it was a kind of like a subconscious thing, knowing that it's not the only means of, you know, making a way for yourself would probably make it so that it would be a more fun experience, because you'd know that you could always walk away if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But I know you said that you're not the kind of person that makes goals, but you have certain intentions.
Yeah.
What are your intentions right now?
Well, the composing is fairly new to me. I mean, it's been 4 years now. So my intentions I set for myself are just, I guess they are sort of goal oriented, but like I put out, you know, an intention. I want to do this, you know, I want to score a film. I want to score a TV series. I love doing trailers, but I want to also do these other things. I sort of miss performing live. I mean, I don't really miss touring, to be honest with you, but I do miss performing occasionally. It's not something I really miss, but I do miss it. And I sort of set that intention out that maybe I'll perform again in some capacity. Just putting out like, I want to meet this person. I want to score a show like this.
Who do you want to meet?
Yeah, I mean, who do I want to meet now? I guess any like upcoming filmmaker or somebody with a great idea that could give me an opportunity to help them realize something special. That's who I want to meet.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's the way to do it, is to find somebody that's kind of in a similar place as you are.
Like, I don't want to necessarily meet someone famous. I mean, sure, I'd love to sit down and talk to Christopher Nolan for an hour, but like...
But he's not going to necessarily tap you to score his next film, because he's already established and he already has people that he works with.
Sure. But some kid, some guy, some girl, anybody who's got like a really cool concept or an idea, and I can help them, or they think I can help, or I think I can help, and we have a mutual understanding or a vision for something. I want to meet people like that, you know? I want to keep doing special things.
You also mentioned that you're getting ready to become a parent.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I feel really good about it. There were phases in my life where I didn't feel that great about it, because of certain things in my life that just kind of made me feel like I didn't want to be a parent. But now,
like, what didn't make you want to be a parent?
Well, I guess my upbringing and feeling sort of like certain things that I probably don't want to talk about, but that did make me feel like, I don't know if I want to be a parent, you know? And
like, you felt like you didn't necessarily have a model for the type of parent you wanted to become, that you would want to be?
More the mindset I had about children and having kids that I sort of developed from being a kid, from my upbringing, which in a nutshell was sort of like feeling like, I don't know, a burden in a weird way. So that was hard for me to like get my head around, the feeling that kids are not a burden. Kids are not something that's going to make your life nothing but difficult, or like prevent you from doing certain things.
Right.
That kids are an opportunity, that kids are a special thing, that it's not like your life is over if you have a kid, you know, which is a weird thing that I think is sort of out there for some people, is like...
Well, definitely if you're an artist too.
Yeah.
Because for me, I've seen so many musicians that are terrible parents that it scared me.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to...
I'm listening, sorry.
I wanted to be able to be the kind of parent that a mix of, the way I was raised and just other kind of ideals that I have in my mind. And it seemed for a long time like doing that and being a touring musician or being a professional musician were almost mutually exclusive. And through doing this show, I've met lots of musicians that seem to be great parents, or good parents,
Yeah. It doesn't mean that you can't continue to be a musician or tour, or like, not that I'm touring, but like it's a normal thing that people do. And it didn't seem like a normal thing to me, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense to me.
So yeah, I'm like really stoked about it. I mean, I'm concerned because I just watched the first episode of Euphoria, that HBO series.
I haven't seen it.
Man, it makes me real scared about being a parent, especially a parent of a girl, a daughter. It's like kids nowadays, what they have, it's just insane. Like, even just the internet. It's like, can you imagine having the internet when you were a kid? I mean, for me, I didn't have like anything to keep me occupied, but music and keeping myself occupied. If I had a cell phone or some way of like...
Yeah, I don't think that it's healthy. And I think it'll become clear that it's bad, not only unhealthy, but kind of bad for brain development.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, think about your ability to navigate through Boston.
Yeah.
Right? There's no way that you would be able to do it the same way now. And even with Waze, I think it's less efficient and your brain would be less engaged.
Totally.
You'd be looking down at your phone, get doored a few more times.
just coming here. I mean, I know how to get here.
Yeah.
I looked up Waze, tell me how to get there. I don't, what's the fastest way? Maybe I'll avoid might save a minute.
But I'm somebody who's fully addicted to my phone.
Yeah.
And as an adult, I can take certain measures like leave it at home or leave it in the other room. But I don't know. If you have a developing brain, I see the way my nieces are with their iPad. Like they get an hour with an iPad every day.
Yeah.
It's fucking creepy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, but also they got to learn how to use the internet because it's such a part of life now.
I had this whole thing where it was like, I'll raise my kids out off the grid and then teach them how computers are built step by step so they have a full understanding of it. And then once they learn how to program on paper, like I did when I was in college, we would have to write it out on paper. Then they're allowed to have a phone. When they can build a phone, then they've earned the right to.
Then they can have one.
Which would never, ever happen. That's just the ideal. I think that would be good for a TV or something. But yeah, it's fucking scary.
It's scary. I mean, I grew up learning to do things like build a house or change my oil in my car or...
You know how to build a house?
Well, not of every element, but like I was there helping my grandfather build his house, if something broke, we would fix it. If we needed to re-pour concrete, we would do that.
Yeah, I think we're divorcing ourselves from ourself, like self-sufficiency,
Yeah.
So
it's pretty scary.
Yeah, your kid's fucked. Well, you should come back in 13 years and let me know how it's going.
Yeah, forget what I said back then. Just give him an iPad.
Daddy needs to go to bed. Take your iPad.
I'm too old.
No, I feel like it's like when you look at photos from 120 years ago or something, and kids are smoking cigarettes and working in factories. Yeah. In another 100 years, if we make it past like nuclear annihilation, if we can kind of avert that, then the pictures of kids on phones is going to be as jarring if society evolves.
Totally. Totally.
But anyway, Aaron Harris, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. I've always wanted to come on, and I love the show and love what you do, and it's a real pleasure.
I hope it lived up to your expectations.
Of course.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.